Well, thank you for allowing me to join you here for your in-service this year. My name is Jeff DeKraai, and I'm with Black Hills Counseling Services. And I've been asked to talk to you a little bit about coping with the COVID. And I had a really cool video clip, or excuse me, audio clip that I worked on, and it wasn't that good. So we left it out, but it was actually, if you know anything about the band Badfinger, the song Want You, and it was meant to kind of represent how the COVID seems to want us, but we're gonna get along with it okay anyway. So in coping with anything, of course, we know that things that cause a lot of stress and pandemics can be a crisis, and they can be extremely stressful. Fear and anxiety about COVID-19 can cause a lot of emotional reactions from people. Social distancing can make people feel isolated and lonely, and it increases people's stress and their anxiety. And coping with that is what this is going to be about today. Will make you and the people that you care about and probably care for and the community a little stronger and more resilient. So some of the research that I looked at ahead of this presentation was actually from the CDC, and they have done some looking into who responds more strongly to the stress of a crisis, and they looked at different kinds of groups. So people at higher risk for severe illnesses, obviously, that can be the elderly, diabetic people, serious, and anyone with serious underlying medical illnesses, but also people caring for family members or loved ones, and people with pre-existing mental health conditions. The list goes on. People with disabilities, people who live in group settings, and people who live in isolated settings such as rural or frontier areas. Now, I've learned this at a Fort Meade VA training about 7-8 years ago. Sturgis is considered frontier, air quotes included. We are frontier status. I mean, that's farther out into the boonies than rural, apparently. And so, we're all here in the frontier, and the people in the big cities, they don't even know we got indoor plumbing around here, was one of the references made, but we do. But just because we're spaced out quite a bit, and we may not have some of the levels of support and social connectedness that other places might, well, we're considered the frontier. And so then again, that includes, in this at-risk population, everyone that's probably listening to this, and probably most of the clients that you work with. So one of the things that I did find on CDC, and I'm looking at their sites frequently, and as well as the Department of Health, because I'm always tracking numbers. I'm involved with some other community organizations that have to keep an eye on that to look for increase or decrease in trending. But another thing that they brought forward as a supportive thing was a website called How Right Now, and there's the link right there on the screen. And it was really kind of a neat little like a decision tree kind of but really graphically well presented thing on how to kind of sort out what's going on with you if you've got something going on. So I encourage you to check that out. It's good for, if you've got something going on, or maybe if a friend or a loved one possibly does. Past that, one of the best things that I know of to cope with stress or distress is the concept of mindfulness and meditation. Now, everybody's heard of mindfulness, and most of the time when I talk to people, they kind of know what it is, but they don't really know how to put it into words. And I'm going to give you some very simple words to use. that mindfulness is knowing what's going on in your head at any given time without getting carried away by it. And that can be an extremely useful technique. Now, I've listed a couple of video links that will be provided in, I think, a different page or a different slide somewhere. But the two videos that I really like that kind of bring this idea forward are from Dan Harris, and they're easily findable on YouTube. I think the channel is from Happify, it's called, but they're only about 2 minutes each, and they're really, really good in giving us a really succinct but brief look at what is mindfulness and what is meditation. So the first one, why mindfulness is a superpower, and the second one, Meditation 101, a beginner's guide. I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of those techniques later, and the very simple, most basic ones, and sometimes those are the ones that work the very best, a little later on as well. But I encourage you to check out those two videos at some point. They're kind of entertaining, and they're pretty good. So in talking about how do you get to mindfulness, and you'll see this in the Dan Harris videos, it is through meditation. And meditation is not a really complicated thing. Many books and volumes have been written about this and about mindfulness, but it can be a very simple thing. So one of the techniques I use all the time in therapy is to help people with meditative breathing. And in doing this, it's very simple. You inhale for 4, hold for 7, and then exhale for 8. 4-7-8 breathing is what it's called. And while you're doing this, you're focusing only on your breath and nothing else. If we want to get a little technical, you take the tip of your tongue and you put it on the roof of your mouth, right where your gums and your teeth meet each other. That's actually a yogic position. And you just close your eyes when you're ready to, and you take really deep breaths of 4, you hold it for 7, and you let it out for 8. And it looks like this if you do it the way it's supposed to be done. Okay, pretty simple. And you do that, I always suggest at least 4 times, 4 repetitions of that at a sitting, but you can do, 5, 6, 7, or 8 of them if you want. And to do that once or twice a day. If you do, you'll notice even after a couple of weeks of doing it that you're literally just not as reactive. You're far more mindful or able to know what's going on in your head at any given moment, but not necessarily get carried away by it. So moving forward, another concept that I think is real easy to connect with the whole mindfulness idea as a way of coping with stress is imagining a timeline. Now you'll see in front of you a timeline that's meant to be a timeline, and everything to the right of center, of course, is heading into the future, and everything to the left, and I don't know if my left and my right are going correctly on this video right now. I find it's reversed sometimes, but everything to the left is in the past, and then N stands for right now, the present moment. Another old cliche that goes with this is the future is a mystery. The past is history. All we have is the here and now. And so it's important to recognize that all energy that we have, if we focus it on what's going on right now, well, it's going to have a positive impact on what happens later, and it's going to probably help us sort out what happened before. That's the truth in it. And so the tendency, though, that we have as human beings is to constantly go backwards into the ruminating of the past and emotions like guilt and shame and blame and regret, all are past oriented, and they're really a waste of energy. We bring ourselves back to the present moment. That's where we can actually do something about things, any more than worry about the future. It's a waste of energy. Lots of really cool works of fiction have been written about these two ideas. Lots of really cool movies about traveling through time, but we can't. All we have is a present moment. So another, I think, good thing to keep in mind when it comes to mindfulness. Now, another thing I like to bring forward, this comes from a website, and I want to quote this correctly, bobswriting.com/psych/first-aid.html. So this will bring up a document that I use frequently in therapy, thanks to this Australian psychologist, who we'll call Dr. Bob. And Bob talks in his writing here about how to treat any kind of depression, anxiety, or anything. And you know, the first step is really whatever your depression tells you to do the opposite. Pretty simple thing. So those 7 elements are these. First of all, healthy eating. Secondly, satisfying sleep. Next is regular exercise. Next is regular fun, creativity, social connectedness, and the really elusive one, meaning. So just to look at those for a second. I mean, everybody knows how to eat healthy, and some of us don't always do it. But as you might hear later on in this presentation, there's so many times when we will more easily do ourselves into feeling better far more rapidly than we will feel like doing better. I'll probably say it again, so if you miss that, you know, but it's big because, you know, we constantly will kind of not feel like doing better, but, you know, it's when we finally do kind of connect with the idea that first comes the doing and then comes the better feeling that we actually do better. Eating is one part of that. Sleep can be too. I mean, lack of sleep alone can literally create psychiatric symptoms. Hallucinations, irritability, depression, anxiety can come from sleep deprivation. Sleep deprivation in combination with other mental illnesses and or possibly some kind of substances can create some of the craziest outcomes you've ever seen. It never ceases to amaze me. You know, just when I think I saw it all, I see another one where sleep deprivation is somehow involved with somebody's really nutty behavior, stuff that they never ever do. So sleep, very important. There's some discussion as to how much sleep or how good a sleep a person should get. I guess I don't want to belabor too many of these things for the sake of time, but they say it's best to sleep 6, 7.5, or 9 hours at a stretch. And that would mean 1.5 hour increments for each sleep cycle. We have hopefully get at least 4 of those 1.5 hour increments each night. And we have slight times of wakefulness at the peak of each of those sleep cycles. The idea is to try to just kind of breathe and relax our way through those things so that we don't get up every 1.5 hours the way sometimes it feels like we should. The other thing for sleep that I've found is one of the more helpful aids is that if you do wake up and you have a hard time falling back asleep after about 20 minutes or so, get up and do something relaxing, because you don't want your brain to develop this paired association between being in bed, and being awake. The other thing that goes with that is try not to do anything in bed but sleep, because for obvious reasons, we start getting used to watching TV or reading or eating or drinking or checking your mail or on your tablet or looking at Facebook, all those things in bed like a lot of us do. That's not good for your sleep. And just like having your electronic devices like cell phones and laptops isn't good to have those real nearby when you're sleeping. It's good to dock those someplace else and don't use them as an alarm clock, the way some people do, the way a lot of people do. So there's also some research on magnetic fields and radio frequencies and how they interact potentially with your brain, where you really wouldn't want a cell phone really close to you while you're sleeping. And I think they're going to come out with more of that. Exercise, pretty self-explanatory. Another one of those things that we don't feel like doing sometimes, but we must do it to feel better. Regular fun, important. I mean, it's one of those things that if we don't have it, we're not content. Creativity, it can be found in a lot of different things. It can be found in work. It can be found in just, I think this time I'm going to mow the lawn this direction. I mean, any kind of thing that makes you able to kind of say, hey, I put a little twist on this and it looked good. Coloring books are immensely therapeutic, and they meet that need for creativity. We used to keep those at the psych hospital, I mean, in the adult unit and the adolescent unit. And I have to say, other than the regular modalities in the milieu, the coloring books were extremely therapeutic. Social connectedness is also an element of contented life insofar as just, I mean, when we don't have it, this is another way that people get down and into a depressive state. And the last one is probably the biggest one. And if you do go to this website, he spends a lot more time talking about it. He even quotes a book by Viktor Frankl called Man's Search for Meaning, which is a book that was written many decades ago and has sold many millions of copies, about a psychiatrist in a Nazi concentration camp. If he can find meaning in life, I think anybody could. But meaning is huge. And when you ask somebody, what brings meaning into your life? They get all kinds of different answers. Sometimes it's friends, sometimes it's family, sometimes it's a job. Sometimes it's an organization that someone's involved with. Sometimes it's their spirituality. Sometimes it can be a lot of things. But that thing that makes you feel like you have an impact in life and that you have value, that's what brings meaning. And that's also important to have. So if you have all of these, you're going to be doing okay. You're going to be pretty resilient. You're probably not going to have depression. You're probably not going to have anxiety. It's usually when you have a lack of these. And according to Bob, your depression or anxiety or anything else like that knows this list and knows that you need those things and kind of tries to sabotage them for you. So he makes depression and anxiety into these separate entities, not of us. He calls them devils or demons, So think of them like demons that get in you. They aren't you. You aren't depressed. You have depression. You're not anxious. You have anxiety. And you don't have to keep it if you put these elements into your life, according to psychologist Bob, and I think he's right. The other thing that's worth looking at when we're talking about contented life and putting those elements back in your life is what's not on this list. What's not on the list are wealth, success, status, beauty, romantic love, youth, physical health, absence from pain, freedom from stress, having a job or getting out of a job or a marriage or stressful social situation that you really want to get out of, and all the other reasons that people tend to associate with their mood. It isn't those things. We frequently believe it is, but it's not. It's the 7 elements. And one last time, I'm going to back up to emphasize them. And I think these are going to be available, and like I said, in terms of the websites or the slides later on too, if you ever want to see them. Healthy eating, satisfying sleep, regular physical exercise, regular fun, creativity, and social connectedness. Not these things. So, coping with the COVID, we have to take good care of ourselves. We have to take good care of our brains. And one of the ways we're going to get that done is with some of the more well-known researched methods. And one of the more well-published images or individuals in the psychology world in the past 10 years has been Brene Brown. And many people have heard of Brene Brown when you say her name. She really does a lot of work with things like empathy, blame, vulnerability, and accountability. And her work is excellent. If you ever see Brene Brown on something, I think that's a really worthwhile thing to look into. But in one of her books, this is from about 10 years ago, Brene talked about self-care. And of course, this is a kind of a quick way that you can practice really good self-care. And it's called the vowel check-in. So, A, have you abstained today or achieved a small goal of some kind? E, have you exercised? I, what have you done for yourself? O, what have you done for others? U, what unexpressed emotions or feelings are you having today? Ironically, I've been sharing this with people for a long time, and you know, it's funny, they get to you sometimes as we're going through this and they kind of get it. Yeah, we talk, and then tears start flowing right away when we talk about unexpressed emotions, because we got stuff that we keep a little bit tamped down in there, and it's not a healthy thing for us to do that. And so if we can once in a while, even just checking in with ourselves, acknowledge those things, we're usually a little healthier as a result of it. It's just very good self-care. And finally, and this one is vital, yay, why? I'm grateful for whatever it is. They have actually done neurological research on the emotion of gratitude. I mean, with the electrodes on the head and tried to identify, and it's amazing where they've gotten with the imaging technology in the past years. And they're able to notice where there's areas of health and development and inflammation and not good health in the brain with this imaging. And I've had the opportunity to actually see some of this, and it's really impressive. And I know the research is going to go on, but one thing we know is that gratitude is huge when it comes to brain health, just literally brain health. Not only just making you feel good, you'll literally be healthier if you do this. So finding something that you're grateful for. And I was talking with somebody actually today about this, and we were looking at the vowel check-in list, and it occurred to me and her while we were talking that that's probably a big reason that spirituality can be such a huge support for people when they're in tough times, is because there's so much gratitude wrapped up in most spiritual paths that it involves us being grateful for things. So the vowel check-in, I encourage you to give that a swing. Now, basic concept that I use a lot when I'm talking with people about depression and anxiety is a thing called the self-talk model. And it has just 4 very simple parts to it. The first is, in anything in life we encounter, first we see or hear something, then we tell a story about what we saw or heard to ourselves. A story would be a group of thoughts in our heads. That's our thinking. That's our self-talk right there, the story. And then we choose. And you notice I somewhat emphasize choose a feeling based on the story. And then we act or behave based on the feeling and the self-talk or story. Does that make sense? Okay, good. Thanks for nodding. Brenda is my lone audience member right now. Hopefully this goes over. You're smiling, that's good. Hopefully nobody else is nodding off, as I'm going through this stuff. But this is I've looked at this for a long time as just kind of being kind of the foundation of all cognitive behavioral therapy, because it means the way we feel is actually driven by the way we think, thoughts. And when you think about it, practice thoughts, those are the stories, end up sometimes being almost like so automatic, they become like a habit of thought, and so much a habit that we don't even think about them before we actually jump to the feeling. So much so that, well, we can think that we just see something and then we suddenly behave a certain way. And then maybe we can trace it back to, well, we felt really bad or we felt really negatively about it. But really, what we're skipping then is the most important part, the part that we can actually have an impact on, and that is the story or the self-talk. So here's my rather primitive drawing. I actually have my daughter redraw all of my drawings like this, and I didn't have her do this one. It's the only one I had in slide presentation mode. So I thought, okay, well, we'll skip that. But so please, I apologize for my my primitive graphics here. But this is the self-talk model, and it's a thing that I share with a lot of people, and I like them to look at it because we can go back to our self-talk, our story, to recognize, why are we feeling so crappy? And especially practice thoughts. And it's the place that we go back to is the story. So we see or hear something, we tell a story about it, we choose a feeling, we act or behave. You'll notice I've also drawn, that indeed is a human brain diagram, a dissected human brain, as you can see. Even Brenda's laughing at me over that one. But that's what it's meant to represent. Chloe draws it much better. And so what this comes down to is this. If you look at this, it's meant to represent the more primitive part of the brain and the more advanced prefrontal cerebral cortex part of the brain. Now, when we get in the habit of reinforcing some of these subconsciously very negative thoughts, sometimes they stay stuck down there. And in the primitive part of our brain, that's where we're limited to some pretty, a very narrow range of emotion or affect, and it's the fight, flight, or freeze reaction. And we've all had that. And, we need that part of ourselves too. But we don't want to get in the habit of jumping down there all the time because not every circumstance needs a fight, flight, or freeze. So it is in examining the self-talk. It is in coming back to that story. I'm circling the tell a story thing with my finger right now. You can't really see it, but that's what I'm doing. Emphasizing that. I don't know, can my cursor be seen up here right now? Oh, good, thank you. So I can use my cursor instead of my finger, and I'll do that. It's in this area that we can actually bring ourselves from here elegantly to here, where we have the more advanced and modern brain function of problem solving and solution focus versus problem focus. And we're able to kind of sort some things out. And of course, mindfulness is up here, not down here. just another technique or strategy for catching some of our negative self-talk and recognizing that it's in those stories that we can actually make an impact on how we feel. All right. Now, this is just kind of, I guess, re-emphasis, a stronger emphasis toward that thing I just mentioned about thoughts lead to feelings. You know, feelings or emotions literally come from the way we think about something. And we can have those habits of thought. And if we understand that we choose or pick our own way of thinking, our own thoughts, we can actually influence the way we feel by calling some of those thoughts out sometimes, like we should. And, you know, everybody's been in a position where they've kind of had that self-righteous thought about how something should be. But then once in a while, we're able to say, oh, but wait a minute, you know, it's not really like that. It's not really that bad. And again, I bring forward the last statement that I made earlier about keeping in mind that we will always be able to do or behave ourselves in feeling better much more rapidly than we will feel like doing better. Does it still make sense? Good. Thanks for nodding. All right. Let's see where that takes us. Well, that takes us to a beautiful pond of water. Well, that looks more like an ocean with a sky meeting it. And it's right here that I'd like to pause for a minute. And may we pause, Brenda, for a minute? All right. This has been a pretty steady barrage of concepts today, and I'm grateful for your attention and your willingness to consider these things. The whole idea is geared toward trying to, you know, find our way through this mess that we've got going right now. And you know, I've heard people talk about the idea that well, the concept of the new normal, and oh, that bothers me. I hate that concept and that phrase, because really it was going to be the new normal whether we had a COVID-19 or not. You know, it was always going to be a new normal. It was never going to be exactly like it was before, but that's a game that we play in our own heads all the time. So, you know, I just challenge you to think in terms of this being just the way life is going to go, and the way life is right now. That's a mindful approach to it. And then that all we can do is the best that we can in this moment now, and things will work out. I'm not sure who said this, but I always quote it. Everything will be okay in the end. If it's not okay, it's not the end. And and one other or two other thoughts to leave you with. Especially in the COVID-y time that we're in right now, there's this tendency I've found, not only now but other times before too, that people have to just kind of really glob on to media, and especially news media, and overdose on it. See if you can catch yourself doing that if you are, because it's not a healthy thing. I mean, take your media, or especially your news media, in reasonable doses. You know, I've had some people that we say to them, let's limit this to a half hour in the morning and a half hour at night, so that they're not constantly obsessing over this. Media is always there. That's the other thing that's kind of different today than it was however many years ago. So we have to be mindful of that and consider a diet of media sometimes. I mean, I used to talk about media diet with kids a lot, just in terms of how many video games are you playing relative and in correlation to how much are you reading or how much are you studying, you know, and we found, of course, that it was a much higher amount of gaming media than it was reading media. So the media diet. Another thing that I use frequently, and this is going to take just another minute to talk about, and I'm almost done. But I would invite you to find, as you're looking here at this screen, some small circle on the wall. It could be on the wall back here, it could be the walls beside, but just aim for a small circle. And if you can't see one, then imagine one. It could maybe even be a clock. But look at that and put your focus on that small circle for a minute. And imagine that everything in life you control fits in that small circle. And now, roaming outside of that circle and into a much larger area, and of course into infinity, are all the things that you do not control. Think of it of something that you don't control. And you know, if I were there live, I'd be saying, somebody say something. But I'll give a couple of examples, and these are the most common. Other people. Do you control other people? Nope. But do they affect us? Profoundly. But how often do we get bent out of shape over when somebody does not think or feel or behave the way we want them to? And the answer is almost a lot, okay? But do we control them? No way. So in proximity from that small circle that you're looking at, other people might as well be all the way to Pluto. And in this concept, you also recognize that how far away something is from that small circle that you're looking at is relative to how anxiety producing it can be. So if you decide that other people are in control of you, well, you're going to be prone to a lot of anxiety over that. Another thing, and if you're looking at a clock, well, another thing we don't control is time. We cannot travel backwards in time. We cannot travel forwards in time. We talked about that a little bit earlier. You know, the past is history, the future a mystery. All we have is the present moment. But it doesn't stop us from wasting lots of emotional energy going in other directions, but we have no control over time. It might as well be from here to who knows where. It's a long ways away from anything we control. And there are many other things, you know, I'm not going to belabor this. There's, you know, the government, politics, you know, all these other organizations that we have no control over. Now come back for a moment to that small circle that you were looking at, and imagine inside that circle is what you control. What do you actually control? And if anybody said, myself, it's the only thing. It's the only thing we control. It's what we do and how we think. And of course, if we have enough awareness of how we're thinking about things, we actually get to have an influence on, you know, how we feel. So if you understand this now, if I explained it correctly, and I asked the question, what do you think would be healthier, especially in a COVID crisis, an internal or an external locus of control? That is the focus of where control comes from in your life. And if I explained it the right way, you probably would say internal, right? I hope not everybody said external. That would be terrible. Anyway, so we keep an internal locus of control, and that's that whole concept. Well, believe it or not, I think I ran out of stuff to talk about here. So I really appreciate the attention and time that you've given. I really appreciate all the work and efforts that everybody in this organization does for people. I know a few of them myself, and I admire your efforts and encourage you to stay with it, because it's a meaningful endeavor. So thank you again, and we'll see you around.